everybody, welcome to another health chat with me. We are going to be talking about ADD and ADHD in females today. Females get so much more undiagnosed or underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed than males do, just because our symptoms are so similar to so many things that just strictly females experience in general all the time because of our hormone fluctuations and even, from our periods, like blood loss, the iron, the lack of iron, or the anemia that happens so much in females too. Again, it can happen in men, but it's more frequently associated with females. And because of that, attention deficit disorders get very, very undiagnosed. And a lot of the times too, like depression or stress or anxiety are symptoms of an attention deficit disorder. And then women just get diagnosed as like depressed or anxious. And that's not necessarily what's happening to them. It's just like a symptom of their brain not being, or their brain not processing things properly, and them, not taking care of it in the proper way just because of that, right? So another reason that it goes so misdiagnosed is because women typically have what is inattentive ADHD, which is just ADD. So when we think of somebody that has ADHD, we assume they're like bouncing off the walls, they're like screaming, running around, like just insane, and which is typical, but not necessarily in females. So females are typically a little more withdrawn. They can seem kind of messy, but to them it seems like organized, or they can seem really fatigued, or again, depressed, anxious, have a little bit of low self-esteem. They can either talk all the time and seem like they're really, really excited about something and then just like completely stop. Or they can like frequently cry or like have these emotional bouts that seem really, really extreme, like to an adult. We'd be like, why are they acting like that? They're not necessarily having tantrums. It's just like their brain can't process the sensory information that's giving to them. They can be constantly interrupting conversations. I know I have had that issue with mine, because that's something that I experienced or have experienced my whole life. And I have a couple friends like that too. When we interrupt, we just have to like get it out. It's not that we're trying to like one up the conversation or we're trying to interrupt. It's just like somebody says something, we're like, oh my God, I totally get that. We share our experience so that the person has like a safe space to know, like, no, when I say I get it, I totally get it. And it's such a thing, like it gets to the point where all of us, we're like biting our tongue and then we forget what we were even gonna say. So that's why some people with that kind of attention deficit disorder too, like they seem like they're trying to one up people or interrupt, but it's just like their brain cannot process it any different. They have to get it out or else they're never gonna get it out, or they just like hold it within themselves and then it just like festers into anxiety. So another couple things is like frequent daydreaming, like trouble paying attention, obviously. Like I said, difficulty, like messy areas, and like difficulty finishing work. Like I'm so bad for that. I will hyperfixate on something. I will start it super, super early. Then I will completely forget about it. And then it'll be like 90% done when it's due. I'm just like, oh my God, I have so many things to do. So it's like, either hyperfixate or I completely forget things. And for myself, I was able to mitigate it through my entire life to this point because I was so active. I was always in sports. I was always playing instruments. I was always doing something that my brain was really active. Like it might have been too much stimulation, but I was like always doing something so that I could feel just normal. And now that I'm in school all the time, I'm so sedentary. I am on the computer way more, which is like, it's really, really hard for me to be on a computer that much since my last concussion. And I'm drinking coffee, which is very bad for you when you have it, or it can be very bad for you depending on like how your body deals with your attention deficit disorder. So some people actually need caffeine to just be normal. But anybody that knows me knows that when I'm caffeinated, I might as well be bouncing off the walls. Like even when I have a little bit of sugar too, I'll eat half an apple and I'll be like running marathons. Like it's insane how my body processes that kind of stuff. It just hits me so much more aggressively. And like I said, I was always able to mitigate it really well. I watch my diet. I try and avoid caffeine. Now, obviously, I'm not because I'm exhausted from being at a computer all the time. And I try to be as active as possible. But my thing is, I need to be playing sports. I need to be doing something that's like really engaging, that has my attention at all time. Because when I'm just at the gym, I just like mess around. I'm like, well, I didn't really do much, but like my endorphins are up now, so cool. But it's very different for everybody. And I'll add a list too of the foods that people should be avoiding, or certain ingredients, because in North America, like everything has sugar in it and everything has dyes in it that it doesn't need to have. It's just mainly for, taste, in order to make that person get addicted to it, or the dyes like just for visual appeal, which it doesn't really need, but it's a marketing ploy. So all those things though make it so much worse for kids and for people with attention disorders and for, obesity, diabetes, all of that. It's just like, it's horrible over here because of all this added sugar and ingredients. So we'll add a list on that as well. I will add a list on all of, the female symptoms versus the male symptoms, like kind of how it goes misdiagnosed. But again, there's such a stigma around it. Like I even went on medication for it very recently. It made me feel horrible. It could help with some things, but it made me feel so bad that I was like, I would rather just be more of a flight risk than this person that's on this medication. Like I don't handle medication well, and that's why I've always tried to mitigate it with, natural processes. Like taking omega-3s too is like a huge one right before bed. I do that, and like the GABA, vitamins, things like that really helps. But keeping my blood sugar constant is one thing, and keeping my brain engaged and being active. So again, playing sports was like perfect for me. But with COVID and everything, we're getting a little more back to it, but it's hard. And even keeping track of conversations, or like my schooling, I have about 10 schedules, and I try, even with all of them, it's like impossible to keep you on task. Like it's a process. So there's such a stigma around it. And even when I told people that I had it, they're like, oh, don't say you have that. I'm like, don't say I have what? I didn't say I was a psychopath. I said that like I'm neurodivergent in a certain way. Like my brain just processes things different. I've always been like that. People who are neurodivergent too are a little more direct, which people know me. I'm usually fairly direct. I try to mask it though, which is something neurodivergents do quite a bit, is we know that we're different, and we know that we're experiencing things not like that are necessarily socially acceptable. So we mask it in order to like be socially acceptable. And the amount of work that it takes in order for us to do that is exhausting. That's why a lot of social settings for me I'll avoid them completely, because I'm like, I'll have to have these really boring conversations that don't engage my brain. I just like, I get anxiety from it. I want nothing to do with it. I know I'm going to be exhausted afterwards, just like trying to put on a show of like, oh, I'm, normal in society, which is like something that we shouldn't have to do, but we do it to make others feel comfortable, which is, it's tiring. That's why when we get around our certain people, we're just like, blah, blah, but anywhere else, we're very introverted. So, and we have the ability to be social too. Like we know how to be social, but we're not comfortable necessarily being that social. So we're tired. We're very tired. So it's like people, like I'm the safest in a relationship because I'm not off doing anything. Like I'm probably at home sleeping. Like that's probably what I'm doing. So that's always so fun. But again, like release the stigma from it. Our brains develop differently. And because it was so undiagnosed, like, or unnoticed in like our parents, our grandparents, all of that, like it could be hereditary. It could be caused from brain trauma, which happens frequently too. You could not have it your whole life, and then all of a sudden you get a really bad concussion, and then all of a sudden you have these attention deficit disorders, which I have had 3 major concussions and probably several minor concussions, but I was also born like with my brain just all the time. So I've experienced all of this anyway, so it is possible to mitigate it without medication. And doing too much, you just have to be aware of it. And when you're aware of it, it's so nice because you're not as hard on yourself. You're like, okay, this is like, don't use it as a crutch, but you can be like, okay, I can be kinder to myself because I know it's just like my brain needs this today. Like I can be the most, like I can get so many things done. I can be so efficient one day and get like 1,000 things done. And for like 3 days after, I can't even look at a book. Like I can't even read anything. I'm just like, ugh, my brain is, it's too overloaded. So it's just how our brain stays in homeostasis. It's just the balance that we need. So again, release the stigma on it. It is what it is. People, and we're so stimulated and so hit with like all the sensory information nowadays anyways, like, and probably way more kids are going to be experiencing this as well. So keeping things like consistent helps them. So we're getting like all this information. It's way too much at all times. Our brains are trying to compute this as if we're computers and we're not. So, you know, neurons are going to be overfiring and other neurons are not going to be firing at all. And that's just how it is. We can't really change that, but we can do our best to like try and sort it out for ourselves and make our situations kinder to us. So again, it's not a bad thing. It's just how it is. And I hope this has helped somebody like usual. And I hope everybody has a lovely weekend. I will see you next week.